Warning, warning, this podcast contains spoilers.
Listen at your own risk.
Welcome to Medium Shift, the podcast that investigates how stories stack up from medium to medium through the adaptation process.
In today's episode, the most mediocre show on Australia is looking at the greatest show on earth with The Greatest Showman.
Welcome to Medium Shift. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ev.
And this episode, we are going to be doing The Greatest Showman. Our first musical, I think, off the top of my head. But now that I'm saying that out loud, I don't know if that's actually correct.
I can't remember.
Evan's giving me a weird look. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of the episodes blur together.
Yeah.
We're editing episodes like 10 episodes back at the same time as recording new episodes, and it's a whole mess. But it's possibly our first... It's possibly our first musical. Also, one of the, I think only our second film based on a true story, too. After Ed of the Eagle, which is going to be fun to talk about.
Yes.
So
also with Hugh Jackman in it.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a good point. I did not notice that through line. So, in relation to that, let's get right into it. And what did you think about The Greatest Showman?
I was kind of in two minds of it. Because... like, knowing the history, the true history of P.T. Barnum...
Which we'll get into.
puts things... sets you back. But the way it's presented, the incredible colours, the modern music mixed with classic musical stylings... And, I mean, Hugh Jackman as a lead, it's kind of hard not to try and love it. But there is something sort of pulling me back the entire time.
Sure.
I do think some of the performances are quite well done, especially on the part of Hugh Jackman and Zendaya. Some of the others fall a little flat, I will admit. I'm a little disappointed in Zac Efron in his performance.
Yeah, just
I've seen him do a lot better, and this is just...
100%.
Nothing. It was kind of lifeless.
It almost felt like he was almost harping on his like High School Musical days, but not in like a fun way or anything. It was just kind of, imagine if... Was his name Troy? I don't actually remember. Yeah, Troy. Possibly. Yeah. Imagine if Troy just grew up and joined the circus, basically. I didn't think it was particularly interesting either. Yeah.
And Michelle Williams was also very good in most movies. Just kind of... She was good in this, but there was not enough of her to actually do anything more than just... it was solid... okay performance, I think. Yeah,
I mean, her and, like, we'll get into all this stuff, I'm sure, but her and Rebecca Ferguson are just wasted in this film. Like, it's just, they're literally there to have a couple of women pining after Hugh Jackman, which, I mean, sure, Hugh Jackman, objectively attractive man, but, I mean, their parts were almost nothing to it.
Yeah.
Like, it was literally just... the scorned potential lover and the longing wife to, we gotta do everything together, and I can't believe you lied to me, but I'm still gonna come back in the third act because that's all I literally have to do. Michelle Williams is such a good actress.
Yes.
For people who haven't seen Manchester by the Sea, she is utterly phenomenal in that film. There is a scene in that movie that will be, as far as I'm aware, is being used to teach at acting schools. It is so good from her. But yeah, so...
It's just a shame all the like huge blockbuster movies that she gets cast in, she gets just generic female love interest roles.
Yeah, for sure.
When she has so much talent in all this other stuff.
She deserves much better than Venom.
Yes.
And that bad wig in Venom. It's very true. Cool. Is there anything else you want to say about The Greatest Showman then? Or?
No, I think that covers it for now. That we don't get into too much of the source material.
Sure. We'll definitely get into that. I, in contrast, have a bit of a contentious relationship with this movie in a number of ways. So I didn't see this when it initially came out. We should specify, people who don't know, The Greatest Showman was not a big hit when it initially opened, but it built and built over time. Like, this is a movie that made so much money on almost word of mouth alone, of people going back to see it again and again, and the sing-alongs and everything like that. So when it first came out, I saw the trailers, I wasn't interested in such, but then I started hearing everyone talking about the film, including people in my own family, and then my parents went to see it, my brothers went to see it. One of my other brothers who loves musicals basically came out to me and said, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. And it eventually got to the point where I heard everyone yammering on about it for so long. I was like, all right, I guess I have to see it. And I have a very distinct memory of coming home from the cinema that night, being met at the door by my brothers. They asked me, what do you think? What did you think of it? Like, super excited. And I'm like, it was okay. And they locked me out of the house. They didn't let me back in. So to say I wouldn't call it a personal vendetta in that respect, but I'm frustrated with this movie in many respects. Not only because of the film itself, and because I think it has a lot of good things going for it and a lot of really bad things going for it too, but also just the level of delight and ridiculousness around this movie I thought was bizarre. So, and I experienced firsthand through my family. So yeah, I think it's okay. Everyone in the movie, for the most part, is like trying their hardest. Hugh Jackman is so invested in this project. Like, the music is always going out. All the choreography is amazing. As you're talking about, it's vibrant, it's bright, it's colorful. But it's also kind of like the cinematic equivalent of like cotton candy. Like, there's nothing really to it substance-wise. Like, it's a lot of flash, it's a lot of sugar and style. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it has a lot of very problematic connections to the source material. It should not be based on P.T. Barnum. It should be its own original thing. And it really just comes off with having minimal to no impact, at least for me, certainly. Which is a shame, because I love Hugh Jackman. I think there's a lot of potential in the songs and the music and the choreography. There's a lot of great singing in this, but it had so many significant things drawing it back for me. So, and I can guarantee if my brothers are listening to this, they're just getting mad hearing me say any of this. So, yeah.
I do understand, and I do think, in fairness, I should also bring up the context in which I ended up viewing this.
Of course, yeah.
Because that's always very imperative, the reception of the audience at that time and how they watch it in providing criticism.
100%. Context is a crucial thing, and people can talk about, oh yeah, I'm looking at it objectively, but that you were always influenced by outside factors.
So for me, I heard about this when it first came out, because I'm always a fan of musicals. But I've always sort of swayed far from a lot of like the massive ones, the ones that feel like very much Hollywood blanketed, unless I hear good reviews afterwards. So I'm not going to go to a musical on first night if it's something incredibly high budget, high concept, and just very much in your face. This is going to make a lot of money because you will love this. That's why I sort of avoid a lot of the Disney musicals and things.
Sure, I can get that. The really like commercialized musicals,
exactly.
Basically, yeah.
So I sort of left this because it felt like that, even if it necessarily wasn't. And I just sort of waited on a lot of the reviews from some of my close friends, a lot of those who were part of the musical theatre, and I got a whole lot of mixed reviews.
Interesting.
Some of them,
okay.
Some people absolutely loved it and kept playing the soundtrack over and over again, and others just went, "It's there. It's very shoddy. It's quite untrue."
It's absolutely untrue.
As we will talk again with the source material, and I ended up just not watching it, but I ended up hearing basically all of the songs because they were played constantly on the radio.
Yep, forever. I could not escape the songs for months after this movie came out. Mostly from my own family, but also the radio.
So yeah, and then of course they released a whole new set of the same songs recorded by other artists.
Of course.
Just to double up. So that continued for another bunch of months on the radio that I had to listen to because I was stuck at work.
Yep.
And so I actually didn't manage to watch this movie until we decided that we'd sort of look at it in regards to this podcast. And I thought, I better catch up. So I ended up just watching it on my laptop off a streaming service. So I probably didn't receive it in the best context. It's kind of one of those things where, you're not getting the full, as some people say, you're not getting the full experience. It's like watching Dunkirk on a Game Boy.
Yeah, of course. I'm pretty sure every time someone makes a joke like that, like a Ferrier and Christopher Nolan just dies. Yeah. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yes. Like, it's a very different context, especially to seeing it in cinema where people are singing along and cheering and whatever else. So
yeah. I do feel I probably would have enjoyed it more if I had that same audience response around me. But given that it was just me, I did find myself being very easily distracted by whatever the hell was going on my phone.
Of course, yep.
Because it was just music, some boring dialogue, then more music and some pretty colors.
Yep.
So I can easily avoid, like, focusing on just the audio or just the visuals and not have to care about both at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially this movie that is, in a lot of ways, this movie almost feels like it is from like the 40s and 50s of Hollywood, when they made those big tentpole studio musicals, basically, like back in the days of, I mean, like Singing in the Rain is a really great example, but it's also like Meet Me in St. Louis and, you know, movies like that have perpetuated. In that it is very spectacle driven, and that it is all about the visuals of what are going on screen, the amazing choreography, all the dances, like you're almost watching the performance through watching the film, certainly. And yeah, you're not going to get the same experience watching that on a laptop screen than you are a big cinema screen. So yeah, that's just an inevitability. Yeah. Interesting. Cool. All right. Well, do we want to start talking about the man himself?
Yes.
Phineas Taylor Barnum, which is a funny name once I actually, especially with anyone called Phineas, I'm like, yeah, I can totally see why you would abbreviate your name to PT.
Yeah.
It's a lot catchier. But yeah, so for people who aren't familiar or haven't seen the film, this is based on
very loosely,
big quotation marks, on the founder of what a lot of people consider like the contemporary circus.
Co-founder,
sure, but also amazing marketing mogul, and therefore the person who people think of, almost like, I'm not going to make that comparison, but so this is kind of the guy who is very much seen as like the founder of contemporary circuses, basically. Yeah, the Greatest Show, like, you know, the big classic, the tent with all the elephants and everything like that, the quintessential image you have of the circus in your head kind of comes from P.T. Barnum in a lot of respects. So, yeah, he was a lot more on top of that, even though that is what he's mostly known of. He was a politician for a time. He had a ton of failed business ventures, which they kind of loosely touch on in the film.
Yeah, but it's very much background sort of storytelling.
Exactly. Yeah, and he didn't even get into the circus business until he was 61, I believe.
Yeah, something like that.
Which is vastly different to what happens in the film, certainly. So, I mean, they kind of suggest that Hugh Jackman is kind of, I don't know, like late 30s, early 40s, something like that. It's hard.
Time is a weird.
Time is a flat circle, but yes.
Yeah, but especially in this movie, they have no real clear distinction on when and how long everything is going for.
It's weirdly elliptical, isn't it? Like the movie could take place across 10 years or 2 years, and I wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Exactly, and it doesn't help that like the daughters don't age at all.
Very true. Yeah.
But yet Hugh Jackman seems to fluctuate age throughout the entirety of the movie.
Yep. Just based on the makeup in one scene compared to another.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, we're kind of peddling around the fact, but this is even though it is very much clearly this man is called P.T. Barnum, it is about the founding of the circus.
Yeah.
It is very loose to the point where I think it's more important to point out the details that are the same as opposed to the details that are different.
So, if we're talking about details that are the same, yes, he did have his museum of oddities.
Yes, yep.
You would call them. While they probably weren't. While it is brought up in the movie, their exploitation is kind of glossed over.
The thematic reading of this movie is a whole other problematic thing that we will definitely need to talk about, certainly.
Yes. Going back, though, to similarities, yes, there was a smaller performer, in this case, Tom Thumb, who was not 22, as they stated in the movie, but 4. And also a distant cousin of P.T. Barnum.
Yep, and also drinking and smoking at 4 years old as well.
Yes.
Which I thought was an amusing detail to come across. But certainly. But Tom Thumb is a real person. Yes. It is still based on a real individual who did perform for a long time. So, I mean, similar as well, in that we kind of see a lot of, we kind of briefly see a lot of the failed business ventures of P.T. Barnum going into this, certainly. There's references to the fact that he tried to run a casino, things like that, whatever else. The other thing as well is, like, P.T. Barnum is also highly regarded, well, not necessarily highly regarded, but he's known for the fact that he's a marketing mogul, like he's a salesman in so many respects. And you get hints of that in the film. Like, they're constantly talking about the fact that the performance is like, it's not real and it's disingenuous, but people love it anyway. And there's even that brief montage when he's meeting all the people who are going to come in and perform for him. And he's changing it up and is like, oh yeah, 400 pounds. Oh no, you're actually going to be 600 pounds. You're definitely going to be Irish. Like, changing all the details to basically try and sell something a little bit better. And that's generally what he is known for. He's known as like a swindling got like the classic carny businessman in a lot of respects. That archetype basically comes from P.T. Barnum.
Yep.
And there are references to that attitude in this film, but he's far more painted as a sympathetic character in a lot of respects. Absolutely. So
He was actually called the Prince of Humbug, and that was a term that he himself coined for himself.
Yep.
In terms of humbugs, essentially being hoaxes and fakery.
Yep.
And that does come up a lot. If you've seen the Fiji mermaid that they very obtusely refer to in the movie,
Yep.
that was very much a P.T. Barnum invention for his initial psychedelics, which was literally just a monkey sewed to a fish.
Yep. And then he basically sold it as, look at this mummified mermaid.
Yep.
So, yep.
So that is probably a clear look. If you want to really get an idea of who P.T. Barnum was, his very first attraction, which they originally were going to put in the movie and then decided, no, that's too dark.
For obvious reasons.
Yes.
I mean, this movie is wildly tone deaf, but I'm amazed that they made a rational choice like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So essentially, he got a black slave. Don't know if she was former or still. They say sort of around
It
that.
was in New York, so it was a bit of a nebulous period.
Yeah.
But I think she was a free person at this point. But she was basically being used as a slave.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she was an 80-year-old black woman who P.T. Barnum claimed was 160 and was George Washington's nurse.
Yeah.
And so she would rattle off all these lies about young George and what he was like, and people would pay money to see her and get confused about how old she is.
Yep.
And then, unfortunately, she passed away, and P.T. Barnum decided to sell tickets to her autopsy.
Yep.
Which is where they discovered that she was 80 years old.
Big surprise. Oh, yeah.
So yes, that if you're looking for what a closer look at his Curiosity of Oddities are like, that's probably going to be the clearest description you're going to get.
Yeah, 100%. I think that kind of exemplifies a lot of the ways that he is, I don't want to say swindling people out of his money, but he is selling a lie. He's selling a humbug, if you will, in a lot of respects. And the kind of, see, this is the one thing that I really struggle with this movie, even more than than a lot of the historical inconsistencies and things like that, is the fact that story-wise, like we've talked about this in mini-shifts and things like that before, regarding different levels of meaning in a story. When there's an explicit level of meaning where they literally say it on the screen in like story points and dialogues that this is what the film was about. And the number one song in this musical is called This Is Me, and all about proclaiming like these lost people who are being ostracized by the rest of society, who are finding like this family and home in the circus and whatever else. And that's basically what the movie's about. It's about like ostracized people at the outside of community trying to, find solidarity and feeling better about their sense of identity and things like that. That is not what P.T. Barnum was about at all. He was the opposite of that. If anything, he was about the exploitation of people and labor for money. And that whole ethos and that whole idea that, P.T. Barnum was an ostracized guy in the same way that Tom Thumb was, because he's not liked by people with a lot of money, is just ridiculous. And I think, obviously a lot of movies based on real life change a lot of things. They can be very loosely inspired by events and things like that. We've talked, if people want to return to a previous episode, which was good fun on Eddie the Eagle, where even though that made a lot of changes to what actually happened, I think it still stayed true to the original story and the ethos of that story. But in this case, it feels like it is twisting P.T. Barnum from something he was really not into this illustrious figure to aspire to. And I do not like that at all, and it does not sit with me well. It feels like, this is an extreme example, but imagine in 50 years if they made a film about Harvey Weinstein as just this guy who was giving young actresses a good upstart in Hollywood. Like, it doesn't... It's not quite an apples to apples comparison, but it really it's not properly capturing the character in a way that I think is honestly moral or ethical, in a way that I really do not like. And you're totally fine in saying that, that shouldn't matter and you should take the movie on its own merits, irrespective of who he was in real life. But the fact that it is called The Greatest Show, it is about the foundation of the circus, he's explicitly called P.T. Barnum, they brought those comparisons on themselves. If they wanted to make the movie that they clearly wanted to make, they should have just made a brand new original musical. Don't call it P.T. Barnum, it's just Hugh Jackman around similar time. People can draw loose comparisons, but don't actually relate it to the person. And I think that would have been the better way to go about it, because it really rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, with bringing up Eddie the Eagle, it does bring up an interesting point, because with Eddie the Eagle, it was essentially based on the media circus that was around. That was where a lot of the sort of main ideas and that whole ethos sort of came from. It came from everyone else's... the cameras rolling on Eddie himself, and the thing that everyone sort of derived that story that the media itself created at the time.
Sure.
Whereas if you're going to look at anything close to this, there was talks that it was about... Hugh Jackman was reading a whole bunch of books by P.T. Barnum about P.T. Barnum. So if you're going to draw any sort of book source from this, it's probably going to be his own biographies, which are not a good idea when looking at a biopic like this, because you're going to get a very one-sided look, and it's going to throw things off the curve, like you said. And you're going to draw connections that you do not want to draw.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fact that Hugh Jackman read a bunch of books written by P.T. Barnum kind of shows in a lot of the ways, because the way this movie presents P.T. Barnum and the circus and just spectacle in general is something that P.T. Barnum himself would be pleased with. This would be the kind of movie he would engineer, which is in character with the type of person we know him as this kind of marketing swindler mogul. But I don't think it's a particularly good thing for the type of movie that it is at all. It is a kind of a gross romanticization in a lot of ways. Yeah, absolutely, to your point. You make a really good point. Yeah.
And you're right about P.T. Barnum loving this depiction of it, because it makes him the sole creator of this whole circus, when in fact he was only one of two. He was one of two people.
Yep.
It was the Bailey and Barnum circus. You're completely missing who Zac Efron's character was loosely based on in terms of Bailey, but he was a lot there from the start. He was the one that was doing very much the initial circus work. He was the one that was the actual probably blood of the circus itself, rather than the full marketing experience that P.T. Barnum made it.
Of course.
He was the one that actually sort of took things from nothing to something and provided an actual service and entertainment for people. And of course, he gets not even a name in this movie.
No, they don't even show like anything. Like they didn't even show a banner at the end just saying Bailey and Barnum or something like that. There's no reference to it. Like that's definitely a fair comparison you can make with Zac Efron being based on him. But at the same time, like he was almost entirely a fictional character unto himself. So Zac Efron is fictional. Zendaya's character is entirely fictional as well.
Very, very, very loosely based on Bailey's wife.
But
again, so much so that they gave them new names.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
which is a weird choice. I find
it's very weird. It really feels like the ethos behind this movie, because this movie was a passion project for Hugh Jackman. Like he tried to make this film for I think 7 years. Like he started working on this project in 2009, but what he clearly wanted to make was one of those big classic spectacle-driven musicals from the 40s and 50s that he clearly loves. Like Hugh Jackman, I love him. I think he's an amazing guy in a lot of respects, and he's a fantastic actor. And he's a very classically trained like theater performer in a lot of ways. Like he can sing, he can perform, which is awesome. And I think a lot of his talents are really shown in this movie. But it does feel like he was less interested in the fact that it was the P.T. Barnum story, and more the fact that this is a big musical that I can star in and I can kind of indulge in that respect. Apparently one of the reasons it took so long for it to get made was the fact that the studio didn't really want to take a risk on a new original musical. And part of me even wonders, this is probably not right, but part of me even wonders if it was more Hugh Jackman had the idea for the musical and it was later tied into P.T. Barnum as a way to sell the film, because it gave it something to be based on. But I mean, I don't think that is at all the case, but that is kind of what I feel watching the film. It's not as interested in P.T. Barnum and more interested in just making a big spectacle musical. No, it's super interesting. But super, problematic at the same time.
Yeah.
Saying that word a lot.
I guess that's kind of one of the issues you're going to run into when you're making any sort of movie on a person's life. Probably the biggest issue is you're not going to have these clear black and white good people and very snarky evil critics in this particular case.
Oh, because we need to talk about the meta commentary in this film as well. That's a whole other thing. Yep, of course.
Yeah, but before we go into that conversation, I do just want to say humans are incredibly grey in the sense that they have morals all over the place.
Yep.
Morals change from culture to culture. You're not going to be able to find someone who is so clear-cut as a good person or very sympathetic. So I can see why they'd have to make all these liberties. But it kind of feels like there's too many.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they didn't even touch some of the actual good things that P.T. Barnum actually did.
Funnily enough, he tried to abolish slavery.
Yes.
He had a political career for a while. Yeah. So
He was part of the Temperance Society. He was trying to cut back on the rampant alcohol abuse that was going on at the time.
yeah.
And none of that was touched in the movie.
Yep. Once again, I think they're more disinterested in making a big musical.
Yeah.
They're not interested in making this a P.T. Barnum biopic. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's probably some other details worth mentioning as well. I do think it's very interesting that he was subsequently anti-slavery and also did that horrible thing with the woman as well. I don't know, a little
And
bit
if
weird.
this musical is anything to go by, he did a lot of drinking and then got a lot of money on the Temperance Society lecture run.
Exactly. Once again, it's there's a classic phrase that has been referenced to Barnum that is connected to Barnum, but we don't actually have any evidence of it being said, which is there is a sucker born every minute, which I'm sure most people have heard. Yeah. Even though we don't actually have any evidence that P.T. Barnum said that himself, the fact that it is attributed to him, I think kind of says a lot of things in its own right. And I think it kind of speaks to the fact that even some of the more noble things he has done, it's all about... He's kind of like a contemporary Hollywood executive in a lot of ways, but it's a slimy executive that is being turned into the star of a big budget musical. It doesn't really work.
You mentioned that, and there's one line pops straight into my head, and there's, you're a theatre critic who can't enjoy the theatre.
Yep, that whole critic character is just... See, this is the thing. While watching this for the first time, when that scene happened, when the critic comes up and he's like, this is all real and it doesn't matter, but look at these smiles, this is real, and it almost felt like a commentary, an implicit commentary on the reception that the film got, because this film was fairly mixed by critics for a lot of the reasons that we've been talking about. In a way that, I thought the film was almost self-aware. I thought it was almost knowingly indulging in the fact that P.T. Barnum would have condoned this, and this is such a romanticized version of this story. But it never goes any further than those couple of brief lines and scenes with that critic. And even the critic is won over by the end of the movie as well. So, I don't know, I've heard this argument made in relation to the Transformers movies as well, and that they are like the most quintessential American satires in how they basically indulge and mock the ridiculous excess that audiences enjoy in that way, and that Michael Bay is technically one of the great contemporary satirists of all time, which I don't buy. I don't think he's smart enough for that. But I think a similar argument can almost be made for this movie too, that it is almost like an incredibly straight-faced satire, self-aware critique of the type of spectacle and the type of romanticization that it is indulging in, and that an audience laps up, which I think make for a far, far more interesting and clever movie if that is the case, but I just don't think it is.
Well, it throws a whole lot of sudden clarity to the whole opera subplot that was going on with the opera singer and the fake affair.
Oh, yeah, which never happened in real life. Yeah. Once again, Rebecca Ferguson being done dirty. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
And the real reason she left was because she worked out what kind of person P.T. Barnum was and grew tired of his marketing tactics.
Yep.
Which I can see why they want to take that bit away from them in the movie.
Exactly. So,
but I find it hilarious that they've got an Australian lead in a very American movie, and his character then has to bring in a Swede to then entertain the higher masses of the American market that they couldn't get with the spectacle-driven idea of the circus. So they need some star power, some highbrow to get the top run going, which feels even more of a meta commentary on the movie itself.
Exactly. But once again, I don't think it's intended. Symptomatic meaning. I think there is a way you can read this movie as kind of an ingenious satire. But I don't think it's intended Yep.
No,
But I
not
think the
at all.
subtext is definitely there if you look for it, which I, once again, find interesting. But I also think the movie is still annoying enough in so many others. This movie is such a mixed bag in so many different ways. And it angers me. It angers me in so many respects. Because there's so many things you could have fixed or changed and altered. And I'm totally okay with having a big, exciting, poppy spectacle musical. But just... don't make it in relationship to P.T. Barnum. Don't try and sneak this subtle meta commentary in there if it's supposed to be in there at all. Just make a better movie.
And don't make the music so catchy.
Oh, so goddamn catchy.
I can't help but sing along despite the fact that I know where this song came from.
Yep, exactly. I know almost all of the songs by heart.
Yeah.
Not by intention, but it's just... they just get stuck in the zeitgeist.
They're earworms.
Yeah, they are earworms, and they're almost very intentionally designed that way. So I think it had the same composer as La La Land.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
The same two composers.
Do love the music in La La Land, but yeah. A lot of interesting... I mean, I think this makes for a very interesting movie to study in a lot of ways because it has so much of that stuff, because it is not clear-cut.
Too bad we're only doing a surface level analysis.
Well, we've been talking about symptomatic meaning as well. But certainly, I mean, in relationship to the source material, that's a whole other different type of analysis.
I didn't even mention the fact that he said that elephants don't feel pain.
Oh, yeah, that's
and then the
to
elephant
justify...
is keen to the climax of the happy ending.
Yep, exactly. That elephant is definitely getting abused off screen.
Oh, yeah.
For sure. Probably a few other things worth mentioning in regards to the source material. Other similarities. His wife is a real person. They married at, I think she was 21 and he was 19 when they married. They were both very young, essentially. Yeah. So that kind of young love thing. And they stuck together for a long time. They had a bunch of kids.
4 kids.
4 kids. Yeah.
2 of which you don't see in the movie.
Yeah, because why not?
The 2 that were there didn't have anything to do anyway. So.
Exactly. I mean, why not just change that one detail? So at least that's accurate. They did eventually split up and he did have a second wife, but they were together for a long time. And they split up, I think it was like 20 years before he even founded the circus anyway. So, once again, that timeline doesn't really line up. Even the whole classist undertone where he just wants to be accepted because he's from a lower level of society didn't really happen in real life too. No. His father was I think a store owner, but his grandfather was like a justice of the peace, a landowner and things like that, of which he was named after his grandfather, Phineas Taylor, and kind of took after him in a lot of respects. Doesn't really preach the same way that I was a poor boy in poverty and therefore I deserve to be respected by everyone. Like trying to tie in that arc with the rest of everyone else, I think is, just once again disingenuous and not particularly accurate. So.
He had enough and made enough money as a young child to own livestock by the time he was 21. And that does not say stealing bread to feed himself.
Exactly. This is not a Tale of Two Cities, poor street urchin living off the land kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely not. So, I mean, I get why that would change that based on the themes of the movie that they were going for, but since I have so many problems with those themes, don't think it works. So, is there anything else you want to talk about regarding like the real life of P.T. Barnum? Honestly, I feel like there's probably even more things I could say about this movie, but well as is.
I think this is something we can probably bring to a close. Because if we go too far into this, we can nitpick just about everything, I feel. Yeah.
Once again, there are more differences than there are similarities. Yeah, certainly.
And he was definitely not an altruistic hero, as was made in the movie. No. And I think that's been mightily clear, and also the fact that Bailey got screwed over. Yeah. I think that covers most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just its focus was in the wrong place. In a lot of respects. I think I admire the fact that they wanted to make a big, flashy musical, and I think in that respect they succeeded, because a lot of people clearly really enjoy it for that. I just wish it wasn't tied to this disingenuous message and based on true events, which kind of disillusions the whole thing. So, it's a bit of a shame. I mean, I can totally understand people enjoying this completely irrespective of the fact that it is based on P.T. Barnum, just taking it as a film, just a fun movie to put on and sing along to the songs and things like that. That's why most of my family enjoyed this movie. A lot of the people I know enjoy it for those exact reasons. I just can't quite rationalize with I like to take the film a little bit more holistically than that. Yeah. So, certainly. But I mean, both approaches are just different ways of going about it. In regards to that then, do we want to move into Do It Differently?
Jingle, jingle, jingle.
Jingle.
I was just doing the intro
song. Oh, yeah. I should have said, whoa.
Yep. Oh, well.
I
Time's
see.
gone now.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I ruined that one.
You ruined it.
Oh.
So try and fix it with your... Do it differently.
Okay. Well, so funnily enough, I have. I'm gonna throw out a quick one out there, and then I'm gonna go into my actual do it differently. What I would kind of wanted to do, especially while rewatching this film, for this podcast, that final quote at the end with P.T. Barnum saying is like, just be smile and happy and whatever. I don't remember the exact quote, but part of me wanted, especially while I was picking up all that kind of undertone of satire and critiquing the kind of shallow spectacle that the movie was exactly selling, I wanted that final quote to be, "There's a sucker born every minute," just to kind of make everyone recontextualize and reconsider the film in that final moment. Don't change anything else about it. Just change that final line, just to try and hammer home that really subtle meaning of like, this is like really weird, romanticized, shallow spectacle, and you people are eating it up. And then kind of tell it to them in that final quote in a way that I think would just be really, really funny. A lot of people honestly may not have even gotten that, but I think it just would have. For me, if that was the final shot of the film, and I thought about it for like the next 2 days, I'm like, I think this movie's amazing. I think it's very clever, but no, I don't think they quite go that way, unfortunately. No. My other more legitimate do it differently was, don't even make this movie about P.T. Barnum. Make this about the Bearded Lady or Tom Thumb. Make one of them the protagonists and have P.T. Barnum as a kind of vaguely antagonistic supporting character, which means you can still keep it... Is this your do it differently?
Close.
Okay. I'll keep going. We'll see where this goes. But basically, it means you can keep it a musical. The themes are going to be more genuine because it does kind of make more sense when one of the actual minority characters, rather than a middle-aged white guy, is one of the main characters. You can keep the songs in there. P.T. Barnum can still be a part of it, so it can still be based on true events. But I really feel like the themes and the characters and everything about that would have kind of been fixed with that slightly different approach, while still having it based on some level of source material. So, because then you can also actually acknowledge how much of an exploitative dick P.T. Barnum was, while also still selling it as this movie of like accepting your identity and redemption and being accepted in some way, shape, or form. So, yeah. And yours was?
Interesting. Mine was kind of close. I did actually think similar parallel thinking of making the Bearded Lady the actual protagonist.
Sure, because she's an amazing singer as well.
Yes, she's fantastic.
She steals the show every time she opens her mouth, basically.
I honestly thought she was going to be a bigger character than she was when she first came on stage.
Exactly. She should have been. She absolutely should have been, yeah.
But I decided to take things in a slightly different direction. Still keeping the idea of someone else as protagonist and P.T. Barnum as this sort of almost antagonistic character. But I would actually go with a protagonist more like Bailey. The guy who wasn't even in the movie.
Sure.
Basically have Zac Efron actually be a name proper. Andrew Bailey, was it?
I think so, yeah. I don't quite remember the exact name, but we know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yes. And have him be like a fictionalized version of his life. Because at least then you're not going to have the same amount of baggage as you will with P.T. Barnum. Have this guy coming up, trying to invest in a circus, coming from a sort of middle class to slightly well-to-do family. Him like setting up as co-founder of this big entertainment thing with his new partner, Barnum. And have Barnum be like the one that's sort of pushing the full exploitative marketing capitalistic style, and have Bailey just like get sort of drawn along, has to like work out, oh no, clearly Barnum's off, he's making all this other money elsewhere with the opera singer and stuff, and he's the one that's keeping the circus together with the rest of the sort of rejects. I guess the actual circus entertainers, the ones who are actually actively trying to entertain and put on a show, and have them sort of become the focus as an ensemble after that.
Sure, okay.
And lead the big spectacles and all that sort of style, and have them eventually sort of... I guess you'd have to change the ending to being an alternative history, because as we know, the two ended up going for a while on before they eventually got bought out by the Ringley brothers.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the circus only closed down, I think it was 4 years ago now or something like that. Like they went for over 100 years.
Yeah, it was a few months before the movie came out.
I know, which is weird timing. So,
So yeah, that is sort of my... And there was another representation of P.T. Barnum around the same time that this movie was being made. That was played on screens, and that was in Legends of Tomorrow, which
sure.
we talked about just recently.
Yeah.
And they had a great antagonistic P.T. Barnum who was there to exploit, played by Billy Zane in a fantastic performance.
That's a fun
as
casting.
the hammy,
Yep.
very evil, manipulative capitalist,
Of course.
essentially supervillain.
Which is still larger than life, but more accurate than the version we
Yes.
got. Yep.
And so I draw in a lot of that. Still have Hugh Jackman, because I think that'd be really interesting. Because that would give this whole new level of like meta commentary on manipulation, and like just because someone is incredibly attractive doesn't mean their intentions are pure.
Sure. That's an important message.
Yes.
Yep.
Which is also sort of the whole shtick of P.T. Barnum. It's look at all this incredibleness and look at all the oddities. Let's point and laugh at, and they're weird. Let's look at them, as opposed to actually the one that's weird and corrupt is the beautiful guy. So yeah, that is my essentially do it differently. Focus on Zac Efron's character, name him Bailey, and have him eventually break free from P.T. Barnum.
We're breaking free. We're sorry. The song
And
from...
destroy capitalism.
Yes, definitely destroy capitalism. Eat the rich. No, the song from High School Musical.
Yes.
Yep. But yes, they're very good. I do like that. I do think it's a very good idea. And I think... I'm not quite as familiar with George Bailey, because obviously I only kind of looked at him in relation to P.T. Barnum. But I would hope that you would be able to be a little bit more faithful to history and the type of people they were by taking that approach. I think that'd be I think that'd be a much better project. And hopefully you'd give more for Zac Efron to do as well. I think in a lot of respects. He has a lot to do in this movie, but there's not a whole lot to his character. There's not a whole lot to most of the characters in these movies. In this movie, honestly. So, yeah, cool. Oh, well, good stuff. We have solved capitalism.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
Take that, evil marketing. Yep. Now listen to our ads.
This video brought to you by... It's not even a video. All right, well, let's move
I'd be scared if we actually did have ads at this point in our...
That would be...
By the time we come... This is the first one with ads.
That would be so funny, and I would be so on board with that. Poking fun at us...
Got it. We got to try and find a sponsor by the time this episode comes out.
Yeah, exactly. Poking fun at us through advertisements is just, probably the only way I would be able to do advertisements legitimately. I wouldn't be able to sit here and just read, a series, a couple of paragraphs. I'm going to have to make it tongue-in-cheek in some way. Yeah, for sure. And relating it to The Greatest Showman. Totally a way to do it. Yeah, awesome. If we want to move into recommendations then. What have you got for us this episode?
Well, keeping up with the theme of fictionalized musicals based on the fictionalized lives of some real people, I'm going with another great musical that came out in the 2010s, and that is The Sapphires.
Oh, yeah, I know of this film, but I haven't actually seen it. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. It's a film about these four Indigenous Aboriginal women who form a singing quartet, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Sure.
Meet up with this Irish musician who's down on his luck, introduces them to soul music. They end up becoming a bit big. They fly off to Vietnam to entertain the troops, and there's a whole love story and a whole lot of can they deal with fame? What the hell's going on? There's the fact that it's Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
It's going on.
Yeah, that's a thing unto itself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
So it's and the music is absolutely fantastic. There are some brilliant singers.
Is it a jukebox musical or original songs?
It's mainly jukebox.
Okay.
I think there are a few original compositions. If I'm not 100% sure on that though, but primarily it's very soul-driven jukebox.
Okay, cool.
Musical, and I highly recommend it.
Interesting. Yeah, no, cool. It's been on my list for a while because I remember it making quite a big splash. The fact that it was a popular Australian film, so every time one of those comes out, I kind of pay attention. But I haven't got around to seeing it yet. So certainly one day. Yeah, fun stuff.
Deborah Mailman is fantastic as always, and she is someone you really ought to look out for.
Has she been in anything else that I would know? Or
oh, she's been in so much, especially on Australian TV and film. If you've looked at anything like Clever Man or Secret Life of Us or Offspring or Redfern Now.
Okay, she has been around then. Yep, fair enough.
Yes.
Awesome. Cool. No, good stuff. There's something really fun about a classic musical like that every now and then, I think. I mean, as much as I've kind of lambasted this movie throughout, I do enjoy a big toe-tapping musical number, especially from Singing in the Rain is one of my favorite movies of all time.
It is a great movie.
It is incredible. I love it so much, and I feel just happier just watching it, or even thinking about it. Just listening to the music is super nice. So I would love for The Greatest Showman to be like that, and hopefully The Sapphires is like that too when I get around to watching it. So I'm going to recommend something related as well, but only related in a weird way, in that it's another musical. It's not a musical. It's another film where Hugh Jackman plays a type of performer in a similar period of time. But this movie is The Prestige. So you know The Prestige,
yes,
I assume?
know The Prestige.
Yeah. Prestige, one of Nolan's best movies. 2007, I think it was released around that time. It's basically Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale playing competing magicians. There we go. I totally forgot the word there for a moment. And a lot of things going on there. In a way, it has a similar, which in this film I think it's intentional, but a very interesting kind of commentary on the notion of twists and surprise, and even just reveals and spectacle in film. Nolan does this a lot, in that he kind of narrativizes certain techniques in his movies without explicitly acknowledging the fact that this is about narrative. Like, so many of his movies are about film, even if they're not actually about film. It's all in the subtext. The Inception is all about movie making. The Prestige is similar in that respect. So I think in a lot of ways it's kind of an interesting companion piece to this film, that it is kind of loosely about the same thing implicitly. Hugh Jackman is also playing funnily enough, a more conniving character in The Prestige. And it's also just a really, really fantastic movie, especially if you have not seen it. If you have not seen it and you don't know anything about this film, 100% go out of your way, because the less you know, the more you will enjoy it and the more you will take out of it. So yeah, really, really fantastic. I think it's one of Nolan's best. Well, thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of Medium Shift. We can be found at mediumshift@gmail.com. Feel free to send all of your "I can't believe you hate The Greatest Showman" mail to us. I will read all of it. I accept it. I've been getting it for the last 4 years from my family anyway, so I'm basically just jaded to this point.
And if you want those letters returned to you, you can find them at the bottom of the East Asia Sea.
Yep. But so next episode, we're going to be doing something quite a bit different from The Greatest Showman, in that we're going to be going into a classic murder mystery of a sort.
We're doing Clue.
Yeah, 1985 Clue, based on the board game. Is this the first based on a board game film we've done? I mean,
yes.
We haven't done Battleship, but we will do Battleship one day. But yes, I'm very, very excited to talk about this movie. A lot more than I expected before going into planning this episode. So until then, fare thee well.
Whoa. This is now stuck in your head.